Welcome to Rights and Remedies, the podcast where law, advocacy, and healing come together. I'm Allison Mahoney, your host and a lawyer dedicated to fighting for the rights of survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, as well as children harmed by the child welfare system. Each week, we delve into legal battles and court cases, share powerful stories that demand change, and spotlight the cutting-edge practices that are helping victims on their journey to healing. So, if you're ready to dive into the intersection of advocacy and healing, subscribe to Rights and Remedies today. New episodes are released weekly, and we can't wait to have you join the conversation. Together, we can make a difference. Welcome back to Rights and Remedies. Before we begin today's episode, please be advised that we will be discussing sensitive topics, including sexual exploitation. This may be triggering for some listeners, so if you need to take a break or skip the episode, please do so and always prioritize your own well-being. I'm very excited for our guest today. We have two attorneys from the Chicago Alliance Against Sexual Exploitation, otherwise known as CAASE. Elizabeth Payne is the legal director at CAASE. Upon joining the organization, she oversaw the creation of the Victims' Rights Representation Division. This was the first legal team in the state of Illinois that focused exclusively on representing sexual assault survivors with criminal cases against their perpetrators. She currently directs litigation on criminal and civil cases. This includes orders of protection, housing, employment, Title IX, cybersexual abuse, crime victims' rights, and criminal records relief. And the other guest is Emily Jones. Emily is a staff attorney with CAASE. Emily has conducted extensive research into the impact that the internet has had on sexual violence, focusing on non-consensual dissemination, digitally altered images, doxing, and stalking. Emily has presented at multiple national conferences regarding the influx of new laws addressing cybersexual abuse and creative litigation strategies to combat these emerging issues. Welcome, Emily and Beth. It's so nice to have both of you. So, to kick us off, I'd love to hear how each of you got into this line of work.
Sure. I can jump in. Thank you so much, Allison, for having us. It's great to be here. This started for me in college. I was studying human rights. I was studying sexual violence as a violation of human rights. And so I first started working with survivors actually when I was interning in Cape Town, South Africa.
Wow.
And yeah, it just really struck a chord with me. And so when I came back, I was living in Nashville. I started volunteering at the local sexual assault center, doing medical legal accompaniments. So, like going with people to the hospital when they were doing a sexual assault examination kit. And I just realized how meaningful the work was, how much there was a gap in services for survivors. And so I said, I'm going to law school to do this. And law school interned at the prosecutor's office here in Cook County in the sexual assault domestic violence unit, and then was lucky enough to end up at CAASE, where I started working under Beth, interning, and then since law school have been at CAASE ever since, doing really great work in this area.
Did you know you wanted to go to law school before you started doing that type of volunteer work? No. Okay.
No, I didn't. I thought maybe like people had said to me, you should think about law school, but because I knew I was more public interest oriented, people also said, just work at a nonprofit. Don't go through all the debt and the education of law school. But the more work I did, the more I realized like we need lawyers in this because there's so much red tape and things that you really need a lawyer to help with.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I obviously agree. I'm a lawyer. And Beth, what about you?
Um, yeah, I mean, I also went to law school thinking I wanted to do gender violence work, and sort of narrowed that focus into figuring out that I really was interested in criminal law at first. And I became a sex crimes prosecutor. When I finished law school, I was in the Special Victims Bureau in an office in New York. And I did that. I was a senior assistant district attorney there for several years and did felony sex crimes and sexual abuse of children cases. And then I ended up coming to CAASE where I am now, moving to Chicago. So I've always had a passion for these issues, and I think that it's one of the most rewarding things you can do as a lawyer. And I am a very public interest focused person, so it's just been a really wonderful career path for me.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, being a senior ADI is not a simple task. You have a high caseload, you're juggling a lot of things, you're providing advice to junior attorneys, I imagine. So that
It
is
is,
a
yeah.
valuable experience.
It was great experience, yeah. And being a trial attorney, I mean, being an ADA at
Mm.
all is I think one of the hardest jobs there is in terms of stress and things. So it is, but it's incredible experience being in the courtroom pretty much every day and getting to litigate. And I feel like I became a really good litigator. I mean, in terms of the stages of how good litigators can be, I think I'm doing all right. So.
Yeah, I think you can probably say that you're a good litigator. Okay, so tell me about Case. First of all, where do you work?
CAASE, the Chicago Alliance Against Sexual Exploitation, is a nonprofit that provides free legal services to survivors of sexual harm. So sexual assault survivors, cybersexual abuse, sex trafficking, anyone engaged in the sex trade. We provide services to all of them. And we mostly work in Cook County in Chicago, but we do some services outside of Cook as well. We also go to the women's prisons in downstate Illinois and provide services to the women there. Our legal services are employment law, Title IX, which is like campus rape type cases, cybersexual abuse. We do criminal records relief for criminalized survivors, and as well as like clemency petitions. And we act as crime victims' rights attorneys for people who are pursuing a case against their abuser in criminal court. We also do protective orders.
That is a lot. It's very comprehensive and holistic in terms of the legal services that you guys provide. A couple of follow-up questions. What does it mean to be a criminalized survivor, and what are you actually doing in those cases?
A large percentage of people who are criminalized in the justice system. In other words, they are defendants in the justice system. They've been arrested for some sort of crime. Many of them, and particularly female and female identifying individuals, have some sort of sexual trauma in their past. One survey by the Vera Institute found that 86% of women incarcerated in the prison they surveyed had had sexual abuse in their past. So there's studies that talk about the sexual abuse to prison pipeline. There's a strong correlation between people who have gender violence in their lives who then later go on to be criminalized in some way.
Mm.
And we feel that the two are interconnected and the connection needs to be spoken about and have a light shine on it so that the cycle can stop. But if you're a criminalized survivor, it means you've experienced gender violence of some kind in your past, whether it's trafficking or domestic violence or sexual assault. And then at some point in your life, you also have been engaged in the criminal system as a defendant.
And what type of representation are you guys offering to those clients?
So we will do criminal records relief, like expungement and sealing, for anyone who was a survivor at some point in their life, a survivor of sexual harm. So we do that mostly in Cook County, but also in other areas of Illinois. And then we also do the services I mentioned with women who are currently incarcerated. Most of that involves questions about legal options if they've experienced sexual abuse in their past prior to being incarcerated, or perhaps they're experiencing sexual abuse while they're incarcerated. We also do clemency petitions and resentencing petitions for survivors whose abuse was not presented when they were arrested. The court was never alerted to the fact that they're a survivor, and it wasn't considered as part of their sentence.
Yeah. And I imagine that's not something that people just want to volunteer about themselves. A sexual assault is a traumatic thing that happens, and so it's not something that's just going to come up in a conversation
Right.
necessarily with an attorney.
Exactly, yeah.
Huh. Okay. So, I want to talk a little bit about the criminal system versus the civil system. I know that you all represent victims in the criminal system and on the civil side. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between the two systems, pros, cons of doing one versus the other? I think a lot of times people think that they have to report a crime to the police, or they may be afraid to report a crime to the police. So let's flesh this out a little bit. Emily, you want to kick us off?
Sure, yeah. So, in terms of the criminal system, clients that we're working with, oftentimes, some of the pros about the criminal system is when they think about justice, that's what they're thinking. They're thinking this person has wronged me and they need to be go to trial and be put away behind bars or something like that. And this is really like what they're looking for when something has happened to them. And there can be something very cathartic for them about the people of the state of Illinois, whatever state you're in, saying, yes, this was a crime, this happened to you. We're bringing the full force of the law to say that this was wrong and this person deserves to be punished. So
Mhm.
that's a big pro of working within the criminal system. Obviously, if someone's really frightened of the person who has harmed them, they could be removed from society by being incarcerated. They could have things on their record that show that they've been arrested or convicted or pled guilty to some type of sex crime, which brings people a sense of safety. Um, they could end up on a sex offender registry, which for some victims also gives them a sense of safety. It really depends. And for a lot of victims, they get their day in court, so to speak. Obviously, many cases don't make it all the way to that, but if they do, they are able to say what happened to them or give a victim impact statement of some kind. And so those are some of the things that a lot of victims are looking for. On the other hand, it's a system that's really out of their control. Once you go to the police, a lot is in the hands of the detective, of the prosecutors. I think a lot of people we work with don't necessarily understand that when they first come to us. They say, a lot of times I hear, I want to press charges. And
Yeah.
I have to explain, unfortunately, that's not quite how this works. It's not going to be up to you if charges are pressed, what charges are pressed. So that can be really difficult for someone who's just experienced a sexual assault, a loss of control in many ways. So then to not have that control as the process moves forward is very difficult.
I think a lot of times victims also think that if the case does get referred to a prosecutor's office, that the prosecutor is their attorney and the prosecutor is not their attorney, and certain information gets disclosed to the other side, and people don't realize that.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's where we come
Yeah.
in as victims' rights attorneys. Because, as you just said, the prosecutors aren't, of course, prosecutors care about the victims and they're doing this job because they care, but they're technically not the victims' attorneys. So we're coming in actually as the victims' attorneys, representing the victims in their individual capacities, working with the prosecutors and making sure that their rights are being enforced. So that's a unique thing that we offer that is really valuable. And we've come to find obviously the clients that we work with really appreciate it, but the prosecutors as well, because we have this close relationship with our clients and we can help move things along.
And Beth, this is the program that you started, right?
Yeah, so CAASE was doing some of this work
Mhm.
before, but we never had a full division devoted to crime victims' rights representation. And when I came to CAASE, we started the division that was exclusively for that and had attorneys exclusively dedicated to that work. So it substantially increased the amount of casework that we were doing in that way. And we're the only organization in Illinois that offers that service, free of charge as a nonprofit on a regular basis. I mean, it's one of our main service areas. So I think anyone who is a survivor of sexual assault who has tried to engage with the criminal system can speak to how difficult it is to navigate. And it is, even if you are successful in having charges brought, it can be a really alienating and isolating experience for people. Most people don't, they have misconceptions about how the system works, right? Like we've all watched Law and Order, SVU, or
Mhm.
whatever, and it always looks really nice. Like the person who did the wrong is caught and held accountable, and the jury, if it goes to trial, finds them guilty, and accountability is dished out in proportion to what happened and all of that, right? But that's just not how it goes in real life sometimes, unfortunately. We did a study, a case from 2010 to 2019, all the reports of sexual assault to the Chicago Police Department. And only of all of the cases that were reported, only 80 to 90% of them did not result in an arrest. Only 10 to 20% involved in arrest. And that doesn't even include what happened afterwards, right? Like if there was a conviction, and if there was a conviction, what was it for? So navigating the criminal system is really difficult for people. And a lot of people go to the police station, like Emily said, with this sense that this institution is designed to keep me safe. And if I have an issue with my safety, I will go there and I'll be respected, and, the right outcome will happen. And there's a sense of institutional betrayal when that doesn't happen. Sometimes a sense of gaslighting, like questioning, am I mistaken about what happened to my own body? Am I mistaken about what sexual assault is? Did I do something wrong, that caused this to happen? Because there are oftentimes questions that police will ask that will make survivors second guess themselves, and that creates additional trauma and harm, right?
Mhm.
So all of it is extremely hard for people to navigate, and that's what we're trying to provide services for, even at a small level here in Chicago.
Do you get involved at the point where, so law enforcement, a detective most likely is investigating a case, then consults with a prosecutor to decide if they're going to bring charges or not? Are you involved at that stage? Because that's such a critical stage in a case. I've had so many cases where people have said the detective talked to the prosecutor and then they dropped it.
Depending on the case,
Mhm.
we it depends on when a client reaches out to us. There are times someone comes to us right after an assault. They haven't even gone to the police yet. So we're with them every step of the way. Sometimes they've already been talking to the police a bit, but then yeah, we can come in before. In Chicago, it's called felony review when they present it to the prosecutor. I don't know if that's a universal term that's used. No. So we can come in and help out with that process. So it really just depends at what point the client contacts us and our resources at that time. But yeah, we can start even before a case is charged, because that's honestly some of the hardest parts for the client is when they're not hearing back from a detective, not understanding what's going on. And so we do a lot of advocacy and support then.
Got it.
Yeah, and we will go with people to make the police report. We go with them for every part of the, detective interviews, speaking with the prosecutor and the whole thing. And I think one of the things we found valuable at that like pre-charge stage is that um, there will often be a long period of silence between making the report or speaking with the detective and then the outcome. And having an attorney calling and asking and trying to get updates and things like that can often be a really effective way of keeping in contact and making sure the case stays warm, right? And doesn't grow cold and stale and get put on the back burner, even just because of resources.
Yep. Yep. My firm is hired quite often to do exactly that, to kind of pester law enforcement. I mean, they're busy. It's not, I don't think it's in an effort to be intentionally cruel or anything like that, that cases are ignored. But I do think it's helpful to have someone staying in contact. You both mentioned a number of different types of cases that you handle outside of doing this victim advocacy and criminal proceedings. Emily, when I was reading through your bio, all the cyber abuse information came up.
I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I will start. So yeah, I've been really interested and passionate in cybersexual abuse. And so we have been working on those cases, which has been great because there's such a huge need. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head anymore, but there's just a huge increase in the people who are dealing with non-consensual dissemination, what people may have heard of as revenge porn. I know you've already even done a few episodes on this because it's such a big issue. we're really lucky in Illinois that we actually have really good laws on cybersexual abuse. So we have criminal and civil non-consensual dissemination laws that we utilize. And now that law has been amended to include digitally altered images. So if someone puts an image into like an AI generator or something like that and makes it so that it is a nude image or video in Illinois, that's now also civilly and criminally that's covered under the statutes. And even if you're not in Illinois, the good news is that is now a violation federally, civilly, and criminally as well. But in Illinois, we're lucky to have those statutes. So we're really just seeing like an explosion in these cases. We get them pretty frequently now. And so the good thing is we have these statutes. The bad thing is they're new statutes. So just trying to navigate them and, figure out the best way to proceed with judges when there isn't precedent, which can create opportunities to be creative and to come up with great solutions, but also means, we're navigating uncharted territories. So we bring civil suits and criminal cases, like I said, and I want to be clear, those aren't mutually exclusive. We have plenty of cases where we're doing both with victims.
Hmm. I think it's an exciting area of the law because
Me
everything is
too.
evolving so quickly, and it feels like you're kind of at the groundbreaking point of the development of these laws. Beth, were you going to say something?
Yes, I would agree that just even in the past decade, I mean, the landscape of what sexual harm looks like is really evolving and changing because technology is evolving and changing. And the law has only just started to keep pace with it and evolve and respond to the need for accountability when it comes to cybersexual abuse. So we just started doing these cases a few years ago, and we're still some of the only attorneys out there who do it as a nonprofit. I mean, there's just not everybody is still kind of keeping pace with things. So it's really rewarding work because there's just so little precedent out there that you're just kind of constantly trying to be creative. Like, can we do this with a demand letter? Can we file a lawsuit here? Like, what is it that's going to get the person what they want? And what does accountability look like? And one of the nice things about cyber sex abuse cases is that a lot of times the goal is very achievable. The goal is deletion of images, right? And that's something that can be accomplished pretty easily with the right amount of negotiation. So yeah, it's been really rewarding to work on these cases, and very exciting to see the new laws that are getting passed lately, like every few months, it seems
Yeah.
like, across the country.
Yep, I
And
agree.
sorry, Allison, just to really quickly add, we've had a lot of success, as Beth said, with like pre-suit demand letters where we're even just negotiating before we have to take anything to court. And that's a really good option for a lot of the people we work with, especially who really prioritize their anonymity, don't actually want to have to litigate this over the course of years. So that's something we do as well.
Well, yeah, and I mean, these cases are in the media all the time. So I think there's a level of awareness finally now about the severe punishments and civil remedies that are available to victims if there is a civil lawsuit that's filed or if a criminal case is brought. And so I think that perpetrators are taking demand letters more seriously because they know what they might be facing if a case is brought against them. And then just to one more topic, and then we'll close out from here. But in the exploitation space and trafficking, what kind of work do you do there?
So we work with a lot of sex trafficking survivors. That's kind of how CAASE first started out, was with a focus on the sex trade and helping people who are engaged in the sex trade. Um, a huge proportion of the cases that we have are criminal records cases because, as you might imagine, um, people who are being sex trafficked are very frequently arrested for prostitution or prostitution related things. We also have a lot of cases where someone has been trafficked and they have criminal history for other related things like drug convictions. We've had cases where people have theft or burglary convictions because they had a quota they had to make that they weren't able to make through the sex trade. And that's a large percentage of the cases that we work with for criminal records, is just trying to clear somebody's record. And some of the survivors we work with have hundreds of convictions and arrests. I mean, really, really lengthy engagement with the system that's been extremely traumatizing and is also really technical in terms of getting it cleared, right? It takes a really long time. So we do that, and we also do civil litigation under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. That's kind of a more limited area for us, but it's a law, a federal law and a state law here in Illinois that allows someone who was trafficked to sue both their trafficker or somebody else who profited from the trafficking. So we have a limited amount of cases like that. We also provide crime victims' rights support for somebody if they want to pursue charges against their trafficker as well.
Very interesting. Well, you guys are doing such important work. Thank you so much to both of you and your organization for the work that you're doing. If people are interested in learning more about CAASE, maybe they're a potential client who wants to get in touch with you, or if you guys are a nonprofit, or if there are people who are interested in supporting your organization, perhaps through donations, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, we always welcome both new survivors who need our services, but also donors. And we are very much supported by donations. So our website is www.caase.org. It's CAASE. If somebody wants to schedule an intake, they can email us at legal@caase.org, or they can also call us at our intake phone number, which they can find on our website.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for being here today and for sharing all of this information. It was wonderful speaking with both of you. And thank you to everyone for listening. We will include information about CAASE in our show notes, and we will see you next time. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Rights and Remedies. I hope today's episode gave you valuable insights into the legal issues facing victims and the pathways to healing. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Whether you're a survivor, an advocate, or someone looking to learn more, we're here to support and empower you. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others. You can also follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at ALM Law LLC for updates, resources, and more. Until next time, take care and remember that together we can make a difference.